The encounter. Dr. Liam Turner sat in his cluttered laboratory, surrounded by blinking monitors and strange gadgets. His latest experiment, a device designed to detect alien energy signals, hummed softly. He leaned back in his chair, sipping lukewarm coffee, and stared at the data on his screen. Still nothing, he muttered to himself, his voice filled with frustration. Months of work had led to this moment, and yet the machine remained silent. Just as he was about to shut it down for the night, the device let out a loud beep. Liam jumped, spilling coffee on his lab coat. He hurried to the console, his heart racing. The screen showed a strange energy spike, something he had never seen before. The readings were off the charts. Before he could analyze it, the lights in the lab flickered, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. Sparks flew from the machine, and the air in front of it began to shimmer. "What the?" Liam whispered, backing away. The shimmer grew into a swirling vortex of light and energy. He shielded his eyes as the vortex brightened, then collapsed in on itself with a loud pop. When he opened his eyes, he couldn't believe what he saw. Standing in the center of the lab was a tall, striking figure. She had silvery blue skin that seemed to glow softly under the fluorescent lights. Her long black hair flowed down her back, and she wore armor that looked both elegant and deadly. In her hand was a weapon that looked like a mix between a spear and a plasma rifle. For a moment, Liam was too stunned to speak. The alien woman's sharp, violet eyes locked onto him, filled with suspicion and fury. She pointed her weapon at him, and her voice echoed through the lab. "Who are you, human? What have you done?" Liam stumbled backward, raising his hands in surrender. "I didn't do anything. I swear. I don't even know how you got here." She stepped closer, her weapon still trained on him. Her movements were graceful but full of controlled power, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Your machine pulled me here," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Do you realize what you've done?" Liam swallowed hard. "It was an accident. I was just trying to study energy signals from space. I didn't mean to. Summon anyone." The alien's eyes narrowed. "Summon? I am no mere creature to be summoned. I am Arca of the Yilari, a warrior of the Starfire Legion." Liam nodded quickly, his mind racing. "Okay, Arca. Look, I don't know how this happened, but I can fix it. Just don't shoot me." Arca tilted her head, studying him. For a moment, it seemed like she might lower her weapon. But then Liam, in his nervousness, blurted out, "Also, you're kind of cute for a warrior." The room fell silent. Arca's eyes widened in disbelief, and her grip on her weapon tightened. "Cute?" she snarled, her voice rising. "You think I'm cute? Do you have any idea who I am?" Liam took a step back, realizing his mistake. "And no. I mean yes. I mean." He tripped over a cable and landed on the floor with a thud. "I didn't mean it like that." Arca loomed over him, her weapon glowing with energy. "In my culture, to call a warrior cute is an insult. You have made a grave error, human." "I'm sorry," Liam yelped, scrambling to his feet. "It was a compliment, I swear." Before Arca could respond, the room began to shake. The machine behind her sparked wildly, and a strange energy field started forming around it. Arca turned to look, her expression shifting from anger to alarm. "What is that?" she demanded. Liam's eyes darted to the console. The readings were chaotic, and warning lights flashed across the screen. It's some kind of energy feedback. I think the portal is destabilizing." Arca's face hardened. If the portal collapses, it could create a dimensional rift. "We need to stop it." Liam stared at her, wide-eyed. "A dimensional rift? That sounds bad." "It is," Arca said sharply. "Where are the controls?" Liam pointed to the console, and she strode over to it, her confidence and authority unmistakable. She scanned the readings, her fingers flying over the controls. "This technology is primitive," she muttered. But I can work with it. Liam bristled at the insult, but decided not to argue. Can you fix it? I can stabilize it temporarily, Arca replied. But the damage has already been done. My enemies may have tracked me here. Enemies. Liam's voice cracked. What enemies? As if in answer, the energy field around the machine flared brightly. A deep, ominous hum filled the lab, and the air grew heavy. Arca stepped back, her weapon raised. They're coming, she said, her voice grim. Who's coming? Liam asked, his panic rising. Arca glanced at him, her expression fierce. The Kargath raiders. And if we don't stop them, your world will be the first to fall. The part ended with a loud crash as the lab door burst open, and shadowy figures began to emerge from the swirling energy field. A warrior's mission. The air outside the shattered lab crackled with strange energy, and the scent of burning metal filled the room. Arca stood by the broken portal machine, her weapon glowing faintly as she scanned the wreckage. Liam watched her nervously, clutching a fire extinguisher like it was a shield. What exactly are we dealing with here? Liam asked, his voice trembling. Arca didn't turn to face him. Instead, she tightened her grip on her weapon, her violet eyes narrowing. The Kargath raiders. They're brutal, relentless, and they always get what they want. Liam blinked, trying to process the alien words. Raiders? What do they want with my machine? It's just a prototype. She shot him a sharp glance, her tone cold. They don't care about your invention. They're after me. And thanks to your meddling, they found me. Liam took a step back. Am I meddling? You're the one who appeared out of nowhere. I didn't exactly invite you. Arca straightened, turning to face him fully for the first time. You think this is about you, human. I was on a mission to stop the Kargath from activating the dimensional weapon, a device capable of destroying entire star systems. Your primitive machine dragged me out of my battle and stranded me here. Liam's stomach sank. Wait, you're saying I pulled you away when you were fighting? He hesitated, guilt creeping into his voice. I didn't mean to. Arca sighed, her expression softening just slightly. Intentions don't matter. The fact remains, my mission is incomplete, and the Kargath will stop at nothing to finish what they started. Liam ran a hand through his messy hair, panic bubbling up inside him. Okay, let's think this through. If they're after you, then maybe we can just, I don't know, send you back. She gave him a pointed look. Your machine is damaged. The portal is unstable. And now that they've opened a pathway here, your world is at risk. Liam swallowed hard. Risk? What kind of risk? Arca turned back to the machine, inspecting its shattered components. The Kargath don't just invade. They conquer. If they've locked onto this dimension, they'll tear through it like a wildfire. Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Liam stared at her, his heart pounding. So, what do we do? Arca finally lowered her weapon, though her stance remained tense. First, we find out how badly this machine is damaged. Then we prepare for their next attack. Liam nodded quickly. Right. Damage assessment. I can do that. As he scrambled to gather his tools, Arca paced the room like a caged predator. Her movements were fluid but restless, and her gaze kept darting to the shattered lab door. Why do they want you so badly? Liam asked, trying to distract himself from the knot of fear tightening in his chest. Arca hesitated, her jaw tightening. Because I'm the only one who can stop them. Liam paused, his wrench clattering to the floor. Stop them? How? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into a compartment on her armor and pulled out a small glowing sphere. The light inside pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. This, she said, holding it up. It's called a Starfire core. It's the only thing that can neutralize their weapon. I was tasked with delivering it to the resistance forces on my homeworld. But thanks to your machine, I'm now stuck here, and the Kargath are closer to their goal. Liam stared at the sphere, a mix of awe and dread washing over him. So, if they get that thing, it's game over. Not just for me, Arca said, her voice grim. For everyone, your world included. Before Liam could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. Both of them froze. Arca's weapon hummed to life, and she moved to the door with silent precision. What was that? Liam whispered, gripping his wrench like a lifeline. Arca held up a hand, signaling him to stay quiet. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, accompanied by guttural voices speaking in a language Liam couldn't understand. They're here, Arca said, her tone sharp. Liam's knees nearly gave out. Here, already. Arca glanced over her shoulder, her expression fierce. Stay behind me. Do exactly as I say, or you won't survive the next 5 minutes. Liam nodded rapidly, too terrified to argue. The lab door creaked open, and shadowy figures began to spill into the room. They were massive, with twisted, armored bodies and glowing red eyes. One of them let out a low growl, its gaze locking onto Arca. There she is, it rumbled, its voice deep and menacing. The warrior who thinks she can stop us. Arca stepped forward, her weapon raised. You've made a mistake coming here, she said, her voice steady. This world isn't yours to take. The raider chuckled darkly. Brave words from someone so far from home. Liam watched in horror as Arca charged forward, her movements a blur of speed and precision. Energy blasts lit up the room as she fought the raiders, her skill and determination unmatched. As the battle raged, Liam realized something. Arca wasn't just a warrior. She was their only hope. The enemy arrives. The night sky above the lab was painted with streaks of violet and crimson energy, unnatural and ominous. Liam stood at the edge of the rubble, his heart pounding as he stared at the shimmering portal that had formed where his machine once stood. It pulsed rhythmically, each beat sending shockwaves through the air. Beside him, Arca scanned the area, her weapon at the ready. Her expression was calm but intense, like a predator waiting to pounce. They're coming, she said, her voice low and steady. Liam clutched a makeshift energy scanner, his hands trembling. You keep saying that, but who exactly is they? Before Arca could respond, a figure emerged from the portal. It was tall and hulking, its body encased in black, jagged armor that glowed faintly with red veins of energy. Its helmet was shaped like a snarling beast, and when it stepped forward, the ground beneath it cracked. Is that one of them? Liam whispered, taking the step back. Arca didn't answer. Instead, she stepped in front of him, her weapon humming to life. More figures followed, each as menacing as the first. There were 5 in total, their movements heavy and deliberate. They spread out, forming a semicircle around the portal. One of them, slightly taller than the others, stepped forward and removed its helmet. Liam's breath caught in his throat. The creature's face was a grotesque mix of flesh and machinery, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. Arca of the Yillari, the creature said, its voice deep and distorted, like metal grinding against stone. You've caused us much trouble. Arca didn't flinch. Zoreth, she said, her tone ice-cold. I see you're still hiding behind your raiders. Zoreth let out a low, rumbling laugh. And I see you're still clinging to your defiance. It's admirable, really, but futile. Liam glanced between the two, his confusion growing. Okay, who's this guy? And why does he sound like a supervillain? Arca shot him a warning look. Stay quiet, human. Zoreth's gaze shifted to Liam, and a cruel smile spread across his face. Ah, the fragile one. I see you've made a friend, Arca. How quaint. Liam bristled. Hey, I'm not fragile. Arca cut him off, her weapon aimed squarely at Zoreth. What do you want, Zoreth? Zoreth chuckled again, the sound sending chills down Liam's spine. You know what I want. The Starfire core. Hand it over, And perhaps I'll let this insignificant little world survive." Arca smirked, though there was no humor in it. "You know I'd rather die than give it to you." Zorath tilted his head, as if considering her words. "So be it." He raised his hand, and the air around him shimmered. The raiders charged forward, their weapons glowing with the same crimson energy as the portal. Arca moved like lightning. She blocked the first attack with her weapon, the impact sending sparks flying. Liam scrambled backward, narrowly avoiding a stray energy blast. "Stay down, Liam," Arca shouted as she spun, taking down 2 raiders with a single fluid motion. Liam flattened himself against a piece of debris, his heart hammering. He had no weapon, no armor, and no idea how to help. All he could do was watch as Arca fought with a ferocity he had never seen before. The lab was quickly turning into a battlefield. Energy blasts lit up the night, and the ground shook with every strike. Arca was holding her own, but the raiders kept coming, their movements relentless. Liam's eyes darted to the portal, which was still pulsing with energy. An idea began to form in his mind. Reckless, dangerous, but it was something. "Arca," he shouted, crawling toward her. "What?" She snapped, her focus never wavering from the raider in front of her. "I think I can destabilize the portal. It might stop reinforcements from coming through." Arca parried an attack, then slammed the raider into the ground. "You'll kill yourself if you get too close. Do you have a better idea?" Liam retorted, his voice rising. She hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Fine. Do it. But if you die, I'll kill you." Liam didn't have time to question her logic. He grabbed a nearby toolkit and sprinted toward the portal, his legs feeling like jelly. The energy radiating from it was overwhelming, making his skin crawl. As he worked frantically to disable the remaining components of his machine, Zorath's voice boomed across the battlefield. "You think you can stop us, human? You're even more foolish than I thought." Liam ignored him, his focus razor-sharp. He could feel the heat of the portal intensifying, and his hand shook as he rewired the last circuit. "Almost. There," he muttered through gritted teeth. The portal let out a deafening roar, and the energy around it began to spiral out of control. Liam stumbled backward, shielding his eyes as the light grew blinding. Zorath snarled, signaling his raiders to retreat. "This isn't over, Arca," he growled before stepping back through the portal. As the raiders disappeared, the portal collapsed in on itself with a thunderous boom. The shockwave knocked Liam off his feet, and he landed hard on the ground. When the dust settled, Arca stood over him, her expression unreadable. "You're reckless," she said, offering him a hand. Liam took it, his body aching. "Yeah, well, I guess that makes 2 of us." She didn't smile, but there was a glimmer of something. Approval, maybe, in her eyes. "The fight isn't over, human. This was only the beginning." Liam groaned, staring up at the stars. "Of course it is. Escape to the unknown." The lab was gone. Nothing but smoldering ruins and scorched earth remained where Liam's proudest creation once stood. He crouched behind a broken wall, clutching a backpack hastily filled with tools and a notebook. Beside him, Arca knelt, scanning the horizon with unyielding focus. "They won't stop," Arca muttered, her voice like steel. "Zorath doesn't take failure lightly. They'll be back, and they'll bring more firepower." Liam tried to steady his breathing. His legs ached, and his mind raced, but one question stuck in his throat. "So, what do we do now?" Arca glanced at him, her sharp eyes narrowing. "We move. Fast. If they track us here, they'll level the entire area." Liam stared at her, bewildered. "Move where? This isn't exactly a situation I planned for, you know." Arca didn't answer. She grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. "You said you had another lab. Somewhere remote." "Well, yeah," Liam stammered. "But it's not really a lab. It's more like a shed with Wi-Fi." Arca raised an eyebrow, unamused. Does it have power? Enough for a mini-fridge, Liam mumbled. Then it will have to do, she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. Before Liam could protest, a low hum rumbled through the air. His chest tightened as he looked up. A sleek, black Kargath ship hovered in the distance, its glowing red lights scanning the ruins. They're already searching for us, Arka said, her voice tense. She activated a holographic map on her forearm, her fingers moving quickly to mark a path. We'll take the forest route. It's dense enough to block their sensors. Forest route? Liam asked, his voice pitching higher. That's 6 miles away. Arka ignored him and started moving. Then you'd better keep up, human. The forest was dark and unnervingly silent, the only sounds coming from the crunch of leaves underfoot and Liam's labored breathing. Arka moved with the grace of a predator, her steps soundless despite her heavy armor. Liam stumbled over a root, catching himself on a tree. I'm not cut out for this, he wheezed. I'm a scientist, not an action hero. Arka didn't slow down. Stop complaining. If you fall behind, they'll find you first. That's comforting, Liam muttered, pushing himself forward. After what felt like hours, Arka finally stopped. She raised a hand, signaling Liam to stay quiet. He froze, his ears straining to hear whatever she'd noticed. Something's wrong, she whispered. Liam frowned. Wrong how? Before she could answer, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. Arka spun around, her weapon ready. Liam ducked instinctively, his heart pounding in his ears. From the shadows, a small mechanical drone emerged, its red lights glowing menacingly. It hovered for a moment, then let out a shrill alarm. They found us, Arka shouted, blasting the drone out of the air. The sound of heavy footsteps quickly followed. Liam's stomach sank as he saw figures emerging from the trees, Kargath raiders, their armor glinting in the dim light. Run, Arka commanded, shoving Liam forward. He didn't need to be told twice. He bolted, weaving between trees as energy blasts scorched the ground around him. Arka stayed behind, her weapon firing with deadly precision. As Liam ran, a thought struck him. He wasn't going to make it. He wasn't fast, and he certainly wasn't a fighter. He stumbled again, falling hard onto the forest floor. One of the raiders loomed over him, its weapon charging for a killing blow. Liam shut his eyes, bracing for the end. A sharp cry rang out, followed by a flash of blue light. When Liam opened his eyes, he saw Arka standing over the fallen raider, her weapon still humming with energy. Get up, she barked, pulling him to his feet. They ran together, dodging blasts and weaving through the dense forest. Arka led him to a narrow ravine, its steep walls offering temporary cover. She pushed him inside, then turned to fire at their pursuers. The last raider fell with a guttural roar, its body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Arka jumped into the ravine, landing beside Liam. For a scientist, you're remarkably slow, she said, catching her breath. For a warrior, you're remarkably bossy, Liam shot back, still gasping for air. Arka gave him a rare smirk, but it quickly faded as she looked up at the forest canopy. They'll send more. We need to keep moving. Liam groaned, his muscles aching. Do you ever take a break? Survival doesn't allow for breaks, she said simply. As they climbed out of the ravine, Liam realized just how far out of his depth he was. He wasn't just running for his life. He was now part of a galactic war he didn't understand. But as he looked at Arka, her determination unwavering, he felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The part ended as the two of them reached a clearing, where the distant lights of Liam's backup lab flickered through the trees. But the faint sound of engines in the distance reminded them that safety was still far away. A risky plan. The flickering lights of Liam's makeshift lab barely illuminated the cramped space. It was more storage shed than laboratory, with tools scattered haphazardly and a faint smell of engine oil lingering in the air. Liam wiped his forehead with his sleeve, glancing nervously at the pile of alien tech components Arca had salvaged from the wreckage of the previous battle. "You're sure about this?" Liam asked, his voice shaking as he adjusted the settings on a cobbled-together console. "This plan seems kind of suicidal." Arca stood across the room, her weapon resting against her shoulder, a calm yet dangerous glint in her eyes. "If you have a better idea, I'm all ears." Liam sighed. He didn't. The plan was simple in theory, but terrifying in execution. Infiltrate a Kargath facility, steal the rare elements needed to repair the portal, and escape before anyone noticed. The problem: the Kargath never didn't notice. "Let me get this straight," Liam said, pacing. "We sneak into their base, full of hostile aliens who want to kill us, steal the parts we need, and walk out like it's a Sunday stroll." Arca tilted her head, a faint smirk on her lips. "You've summed it up nicely, human." Liam groaned. "You say it like it's easy." "For a Yilari warrior, it is," she replied, grabbing her weapon and strapping on her armor. "Great," Liam muttered under his breath. "I'm just a squishy human. What could go wrong?" The Kargath outpost loomed like a metal fortress in the distance, its sharp angles and glowing red towers cutting through the darkness. Liam crouched behind a boulder, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain the guards could hear it. Beside him, Arca moved with silent precision, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "There are 3 guards at the main gate," she whispered. "More likely inside. We'll go through the maintenance tunnel." "Maintenance tunnel," Liam repeated, his voice barely audible. "What if they have cameras? Or, I don't know, giant space dogs?" Arca shot him a look. "Then we'll deal with it." Liam wanted to argue but decided against it. Instead, he followed her lead, crawling through the dense underbrush until they reached a grated entrance hidden beneath a rocky outcrop. Arca pried it open with a tool from her armor, motioning for Liam to go first. "Why me?" he hissed. "Because if there's a trap, I'd rather it hit you first," she said without missing a beat. Liam glared at her, but crawled into the tunnel anyway. The metal walls were cold and damp, and the faint hum of machinery echoed around them. He tried not to think about how much noise his breathing was making. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, Arca tapped her wrist console, projecting a holographic map. "We're close to the storage room," she said. "Stay quiet." "I wasn't planning to sing," Liam muttered. The tunnel opened into a narrow hallway lit by dim red lights. Arca held up a hand, signaling Liam to stop. She leaned around the corner, her weapon at the ready. 2 Kargath guards stood by a door, their bulky armor reflecting the faint glow of the lights. Arca glanced back at Liam and mouthed, "Stay here." Before he could protest, she darted around the corner, moving like a shadow. Liam peeked out just in time to see her take down the guards with swift, calculated movements. The first went down with a silent blow to the head, and the second didn't even have time to react before Arca's weapon stunned him. She waved Liam forward, and he scrambled to her side, his pulse racing. "Impressive," he whispered. Arca raised an eyebrow. "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, human." Inside the storage room, shelves lined with strange, glowing components stretched to the ceiling. Arca immediately began scanning the labels, her movements precise. Liam, on the other hand, stared at the alien technology in awe. "This is incredible," he said, running a hand over a glowing blue cylinder. "If I could study this." "You can study it later," Arca snapped. "Right now, we need this." She grabbed a crystalline module and tossed it to him. "Hold on to it." Liam barely caught the module, fumbling to keep it from hitting the floor. "What is it?" "The stabilizer core," she replied. "Without it, your portal will tear this planet apart." Liam's stomach dropped. "That seems important." As they gathered the remaining parts, an alarm suddenly blared, its shrill sound cutting through the silence like a knife. "What did you do?" Arca demanded, glaring at Liam. "Me? I didn't touch anything." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Arca cursed under her breath. They'd found the guards. She grabbed Liam's arm, pulling him toward a secondary exit. Move, now. They ran through the maze-like corridors, the sound of pursuing guards growing louder. Arca fired over her shoulder, her shots precise and deadly. Liam clutched the stabilizer core to his chest, his mind racing. As they rounded a corner, a squad of raiders appeared ahead, blocking their path. Arca didn't hesitate. She charged forward, her weapon blazing. "Go!" she shouted over her shoulder. "I'll hold them off." "What?" "No," Liam yelled. "Don't argue, human. If you don't get those parts out, this mission is over." Liam hesitated, torn between fear and a strange sense of loyalty. But Arca's glare left no room for debate. Clutching the parts tightly, he bolted down the hallway, every step feeling heavier than the last. Behind him, the sounds of battle echoed, blasts, shouts, and the unmistakable hum of Arca's weapon. He didn't stop running until he burst through the exit and into the night air. The distant sound of engines reminded him that the Kargath were still out there, hunting them. But in that moment, as he looked back at the glowing fortress, he couldn't shake one thought. Arca was willing to risk everything for this mission. And now, so was he. The final stand. The night sky burned with streaks of red and orange as Kargath dropships descended over the hills. Their engines roared like thunder, shaking the ground beneath Liam's feet. He stood outside his ramshackle lab, clutching a small, glowing control module, the final piece of the repaired portal machine. Inside the lab, Arca worked furiously to assemble the machine's core. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, her face set in a mask of determination. "Are you done yet?" Liam shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening sound of the ships. "Keep them busy." Arca yelled back, not even looking up. "I need 5 more minutes." Liam blinked in disbelief. 5 minutes. They'll be here in 2. As if on cue, a squad of Kargath raiders emerged from the tree line, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. Liam's grip on the control module tightened. He wasn't a warrior. He didn't have Arca's skills, her strength. But if he didn't act, none of it would matter. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "You can do this. Probably." He darted toward a makeshift barricade of broken equipment and scrap metal, fumbling with a small device in his pocket. It was a rudimentary energy disruptor he cobbled together earlier, a desperate attempt to level the playing field. The raiders advanced, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Liam took a deep breath, aimed the disruptor, and pressed the trigger. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the lead raider froze mid-step. Its weapon sparked wildly before it exploded, knocking it backward. The others hesitated, their glowing eyes shifting toward Liam. "Ha!" Liam shouted, a surge of confidence breaking through his fear. "How do you like that?" The answer came in the form of a volley of energy blasts. Liam ducked behind the barricade, his newfound courage evaporating. "Oh, come on." From the lab, Arca's voice cut through the chaos. "Liam, keep them distracted. Just a little longer." "No pressure or anything," he shouted back, scrambling to his feet. He peeked over the barricade and saw the raiders closing in. One of them raised its weapon, aiming directly at him. Before it could fire, a streak of blue energy cut through the air, striking the raider and sending it crashing to the ground. Liam turned to see Arca standing in the doorway of the lab, her weapon glowing brightly. Her eyes blazed with fury as she stepped forward, firing with deadly precision. "You couldn't wait for me," she called out, her tone sharp but almost amused. "Not my fault," Liam retorted, ducking as another blast hit the barricade. Arca moved like a storm, taking down raiders with swift, decisive strikes. Liam couldn't help but watch in awe as she fought, her movements a perfect balance of power and grace. But the Kargath weren't backing down. More raiders poured out of the ships, their numbers overwhelming. Arca and Liam were outmatched, outgunned. "Liam," Arca shouted, retreating toward the lab. Get inside. Now. Liam didn't argue. He sprinted toward the lab, diving through the doorway just as a blast hit the ground where he'd been standing. Arca followed, slamming the door shut behind her. The machine is ready, she said, her voice breathless but steady. We just need to power it up. Liam held up the control module. This is the last piece, right? She nodded. Plug it in. Quickly. He ran to the machine, his hand shaking as he slotted the module into place. The machine roared to life, its core glowing with brilliant white light. Outside, the raiders regrouped, their ships circling overhead. Zorath's voice boomed through a loudspeaker, cold and menacing. Arca of the Yilari, he said, surrender the Starfire core, and I will spare the human. Arca clenched her jaw, her grip tightening on her weapon. He's lying, she said quietly. Liam looked at her, his face pale. What happens if we don't finish this in time? She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said everything. The lab shook as the raiders began their assault, energy blasts tearing through the walls. The machine's core flickered, its hum growing unstable. We need more time. Liam shouted, frantically adjusting the controls. Arca stepped toward the door, her expression grim. Then I'll give it to you. What? No. Liam grabbed her arm. You can't fight them alone. She pulled away, her gaze fierce. If I don't, they'll destroy the machine. And if that happens, your world is finished. Before he could argue, she stepped outside, the door slamming shut behind her. Liam watched her through the cracked window as she faced the approaching raiders. She was outnumbered, outgunned, but she didn't falter. Arca fought with everything she had, her weapon a blur of light and energy. She moved like a force of nature, taking down raiders one by one. But even she couldn't hold them off forever. Inside, the machine's core stabilized, its glow intensifying. Liam's hands flew over the controls, his mind racing. Come on, he muttered. Outside, Arca stumbled, blood streaking her armor. A raider loomed over her, its weapon raised. No, Liam shouted, slamming a fist on the console. The machine roared, releasing a pulse of energy that sent a shockwave through the battlefield. The raiders froze, their weapons flickering. The pulse disrupted their systems, giving Arca a chance to strike. She took down the last raider with a defiant cry, then collapsed to her knees. The machine's portal stabilized, its shimmering surface reflecting the destruction around them. Liam ran outside, grabbing Arca and helping her to her feet. It's ready, he said, his voice shaking. She nodded weakly, leaning on him for support. Together, they stepped toward the portal, their enemies regrouping in the distance. This isn't over, Zorath's voice echoed, full of rage. Arca looked at Liam, her eyes fierce despite her injuries. Then we'd better make it count. The part ended as they stepped through the portal, the light swallowing them whole just as the raiders closed in. The goodbye. The world beyond the portal was a swirl of vibrant colors, a kaleidoscope of light and sound that seemed to stretch in every direction. Liam stumbled as he emerged, the ground beneath his feet feeling both solid and fluid at the same time. Beside him, Arca steadied herself, though her face was pale and her armor was scorched and battered. This is where? Liam asked, his voice awed and shaky. Arca didn't answer immediately. She scanned the horizon, her sharp eyes narrowing as she spotted something in the distance, a looming structure of gleaming crystal and steel. The Starfire Nexus, she said at last. The heart of my people's resistance. We're not safe yet, but we're close. Liam glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the Kargath raiders stepping through after them. The portal behind them shimmered erratically, its edges fraying like a torn curtain. Is it stable? He asked, nodding toward it. Not for long, Arca replied, her tone grim. Zorath will follow if we don't shut it down from this side. Liam's stomach sank. You're saying we have to destroy my machine? The one I spent years building. She turned to him, her expression softening just slightly. If we don't, the Kargith will invade not just your world, but every dimension they can reach. Your machine opened the door. Now, we have to close it for good. Liam wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't just asking him to destroy his life's work. She was trusting him to do the right thing. Fine, he said, swallowing hard. But you owe me a new lab after this. The Nexus was a fortress of activity. Alien engineers and warriors moved with purpose, their expressions tense as alarms blared throughout the structure. Liam could feel their eyes on him, their suspicion almost tangible. Don't take it personally, Arca said as they walked through the main hall. Humans aren't exactly a common sight here. Great, Liam muttered. I'm an interdimensional tourist. They reached a control room where a group of Yilari engineers were already working to analyze the portal's energy signature. Arca spoke to them in rapid bursts of her language, her voice commanding but calm. Liam, meanwhile, stood awkwardly to the side, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. One of the engineers glanced at him, clearly unimpressed. He doesn't look like much, the engineer said, his tone dripping with disdain. He's more useful than he appears, Arca shot back without hesitation. Liam couldn't decide whether to feel flattered or insulted. Time was running out. The portal's instability was spreading, causing rifts to form in the fabric of space. Liam watched the monitors, his heart sinking as he saw Zoreth's fleet gathering on the other side. They're coming, he said, his voice tight. Arca nodded. Then we need to act now. The plan was simple. Overload the portal's energy source, creating a feedback loop that would collapse it entirely. The problem? Someone had to manually trigger the sequence from within the Nexus, ensuring the energy didn't spread beyond the rift. I'll do it, Arca said, her voice firm. Liam spun to face her. What? No way. That sounds like a one-way trip. She didn't flinch. It's my responsibility. This started because of me. It started because of me, Liam argued. My machine created the portal in the first place. If anyone's going to risk their life shutting it down, it should be me. Arca shook her head, her expression softening. You wouldn't survive the energy surge. Your body isn't built for it. And you would. Liam shot back. I've faced worse, she said simply. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Then Liam took a deep breath, his mind racing. There's got to be another way, he said. Some kind of remote trigger, or... There's no time for that, Arca interrupted. Liam clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. You can't just sacrifice yourself. You've already done so much, fought so hard. There has to be another way. Arca placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. Sometimes, the only way to win is to make the hardest choice. Liam stared at her, his throat tightening. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. She smiled faintly, a rare and fleeting expression. You won't. The Yilari remember their allies. You'll always be one of us. The final moments were a blur. Arca activated the sequence, the Nexus shaking violently as the portal began to collapse. Liam watched from a safe distance, his heart pounding as the energy surge consumed the rift. Arca stood at the center of the chaos, her armor glowing as she channeled the energy away from the Nexus. For a moment, she looked invincible, like a true warrior of legend. Then, with a deafening roar, the portal imploded, and the room was filled with blinding light. When Liam woke, he was back on Earth, lying on the scorched ground where his lab once stood. The sky was clear, the stars twinkling peacefully. He sat up, his head spinning. The portal was gone, the machine reduced to nothing but ash and twisted metal. For a moment, he wondered if it had all been a dream. But then he saw it, a small glowing sphere resting in the dirt, the Starfire core. Liam picked it up, feeling its warmth in his hand. He smiled faintly, knowing Arca had kept her promise. The story ended with Liam standing under the night sky, the core in his hand, and a faint whisper of hope in his heart. Somewhere out there, Arca was still fighting. And so was he.